I'm terrible with contracts. Like, I hate contracts. I hate paperwork. I don't go to doctors just because they ask me to fill out paperwork. And the very first deal,
you're a barbarian.
Yeah, and I'm a barbarian. Yes,
they don't.
I
need
just
doctors.
smash shit. Yeah. So I go to this property. We found it also on a foreclosure list, and I'm good at talking to sellers. So I spoke to her. I solved all her problems. She was so excited and everything. And I'm like, I got to get her on the contract. I'm like, fuck. And I take out the contract, and it's a standard Texas contract. It's called the Trek, and it's like, at the time it was 9 pages. Now I think it's like 11 or 12. And it was 9-page contract. I'm like, oh, okay. So I sit down with the lady. I'm looking at her. I was like, well, you want to initial down here, flip the page, initial down here, flip the page, initial down here. So she initialed every page. On this page, you want to sign? She signed. The whole contract was blank. She just initialed and signed the whole contract. And I was like, all right, so I'll get this over to title. Yeah. And, and I'll let you know as soon as everything's ready. She's like, oh, my God, thank you so much.
And you verbally agreed to a price.
Yeah, we verbally agreed to, like, that I was going to take over the payment.
Okay.
We were going to give her, like,
it was a sub 2 deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we were going to give her the $5,000 that she was going to be able to walk away. That's what she needed to be able to move and all that. So I was like, yeah, well, you're going to do that. Then I get to the office. I give the contract to John, and he's like, dude, this is blank. It's like, okay, so here are the terms.
Write it down.
Yeah, I don't know where it goes. I was like, but here are the terms. Here's what we agreed to. He's like, you're fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But the thing is that because I got away with that and it worked, I kept doing that. And I never learned how to, like, really fill out a contract until, like, years later. I kept doing, like, blank contracts. Yeah. People, I'll just write down, like, my company name, their name, maybe a sell price, and then just initial sign. Yeah. And that was about
Keep it simple.
That's it.
Yeah.
So when people get overwhelmed with contracts, I was like, they're like, oh, yeah, I think I lost them at the contract. I'm like, no, you lost it at the beginning.
Yeah.
They didn't trust you. They didn't like you. They didn't feel like you can solve their problem. Yeah. Right? So that's why the contract was so difficult for you. But I kind of proved that contracts don't matter if you solve their problems.
For sure. I love that. So one of your first deals was a sub 2 deal. Do you still own that house to this day?
I didn't own any of those houses. I always regret it, right? Like, you look back.
So you wholesaled the sub 2 deal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, wholesale. Keep in mind, like, I came from being, like, flat broke.
Yeah.
You
weren't even thinking about generational wealth and equity at this time.
I was thinking survival.
Yeah.
Like, I needed to make enough money to feed my family. Yeah. Like, that was it. And at the time, it was like $2,700 a month. So that's what I needed to make just so we could survive. So, and it was a struggle to make $2,700 a month. Like,
especially with $200 paychecks from your old company.
Yeah, with them, I was not. At the time, my wife was working as an occupational therapist, so she was floating the bills. Yeah. But she got pregnant with my firstborn, Nico, and I had promised her that she was going to be able to be home with our kid, and she wasn't going to need to work anymore. And my son was born in August. So in July, I was still not making $2,700 a month. So I was like, fuck it. I made her a promise, and I'm going to stick to it. I'm sitting on my, man, I still remember this. I was sitting in my bed with my laptop, applying at Home Depot.
Oh, man.
And, yeah, I feel it, like.
No way they called you.
No, dude, I had to get through the application. It was like 2.5 hours. I was like, holy shit. But like 15 minutes in, like, I feel my body like just overheating.
Yeah.
I was getting so angry. I was getting so pissed. I felt so defeated.
Yeah.
I felt like I was letting my family down, my wife down.
And this was after you and John were already decided to be partners?
Yeah, this is when we were like, we figured it out. Started, yeah. And it just got to a point where I was like, I'm like 20 minutes into this, and they tell you it's like a 2.5 hour application. I was like, holy shit. But my logic was like, all right, I'll go work at Home Depot. I'll rub elbows with contractors, flippers, people like that. Maybe I can strike up some deals or something that way. That was my thought process. And I already knew Home Depot. I mean, I lived at Home Depot. So I was like, I know more than most of the people that work there anyway.
You just show up one day with an apron on.
All the aisles are, where all the material is.
Yeah, aisle 12.
Yeah, aisle 12. I used to do that. Like, we did so many jobs that when people were like, where do you find this? Oh, that's 13. Towards the back, though. So I'm doing the application, and it got to a point where I almost got nauseated filling it out, and I just shut the computer. I was like, F this. Yeah. I'm going to make this shit work. And I don't know what switched, But from that moment on, I had always made what I needed to make.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for 3 years, nothing. From 1 month to another, I started making money.
That's amazing.
I was like, that's why when people say, mindset, I was like, no, it matters.
Yeah.
It matters. When you shift that, like the universe just said, all right, let me move out of your way and let's start doing that. And every month, it was a struggle. Don't get me wrong. There were times that it was like a week before the end of the month, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't know, I'm going to eat this week, and then all of a sudden the deal will come through and we get paid.
Yeah.
And it's like $3,000. Hey.
Yeah, and we're good.
Yeah,
we're good for a month.
Another month. Let's go.
Man, well, I just think there's so many good lessons in having to go through that and just like having to budget and live below your means. And then when you actually do get some discretionary income, you understand that you can't just go blow it all.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of lessons. I remember some of the times just getting started and going full time and wanting my wife to be a stay-at-home mom. And I went through that a lot. That was looking back on it, it's a lot of fun. Honestly, it sucked being in the middle of it, but man, it created a lot of great life lessons for me.
Well, to me, I think what the issue I came across is that I've always struggled as an immigrant. You're kind of used to doing like the shit work, right? And I'm fine with that. I never had an issue with it. I'm fine with like barely getting by. I've always spent that. But when all of a sudden my wife is expecting our first child, it's like it became real.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, fuck this. No, can't. This is not acceptable.
Yeah.
My son is not going to see that life that I saw.
Nico. Shout out to Nico, by the way. What a sweet name.
Yeah. Well, my second born is Lucas.
Even better name.
Yeah. So, that was before I met you. So.
Yeah. I can't take credit for that.
No, it wasn't. You didn't impact my life that much.
Yeah. All right, man. Let's go. So let's go back a little more tactical before we keep going on with your journey. So that's Sub 2 deal that you were talking about with not filling out the contract and giving it to John. That was after the Home Depot application, I assume, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Talk about what it looks like to wholesale a Sub 2 deal.
So here's where I don't
or maybe
know.
even what a Subject 2 deal is. Start there.
So like I don't have any problems. Like I never met the guy, Pace Morby.
Yeah.
But what sometimes it rubs me wrong when somebody is preaching sub twos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're dangerous.
Yeah.
They're dangerous deals because if you don't paper them up correctly, if you don't do them right correctly, you can really screw over the seller. And I think as wholesalers, as investors, we have tremendous power because we are speaking to somebody at their most vulnerable, that they're willing to do anything to avoid, foreclosure or something terrible to happen to them. And we can take complete advantage of that, right? So what a sub 2 is pretty much the way we did it is they're in foreclosure because they owe payments on their bank. They haven't been making payments. So they're behind, they're in arrears. What we can do is catch up those payments, make that loan current, and then we take over that loan. So we're buying the house subject to the existing finance, right? So we're taking over that loan. We keep making the payments, those mortgage payments moving forward, but we take deed to the property, right? So the property is now ours. But the loan stays in the seller's name.
Yeah.
Right? That's where it gets dangerous. So a lot of people, what they don't do is they don't give the seller an option to foreclose. So if I don't give a seller the option to foreclose, if I default on it, they have no recourse.
Yeah.
They have a loan to a house they don't own.
Yeah.
So they have nothing. They essentially have a loan now for no collateral, right? So a lot of people, what they do is they do that, is they buy sub 2 and they don't give the seller recourse to take the home back if you start missing payments, right? So it's a terrible strategy if you do it that way. And then the next thing that you have to be very careful with is who you wholesale it to.
Right.
So I typically don't encourage people to wholesale sub 2s. I tell them, buy them for yourself. I agree with that all day long.
Yeah.
But wholesaling them, who are you wholesaling it to?
Yeah.
Do they have the means? What if the loan gets called due? Can they take care of that? Right? I know that there are a lot of strategies to, when they get called due, for you to kind of like bypass that. But if they don't know those strategies, if you're not involved anymore, then what happens? Does the seller get screwed again? right? Like what's going to happen in this whole situation? So whenever we wholesale the sub two, it was always to investors that were very experienced. They had the means. They just rather buy it sub two because it made more sense, right? Instead of just paying it out, right, and having almost no equity.
Yeah.
Let me take over the payments. It has a little bit of equity, but it cash flows really nicely because the loan with sub twos, one of the things that it's not just a sub two deal, it's the age of the loan that matters.
Yeah.
If the loan is 10 plus years old, it's a much more attractive deal.
For sure.
Even if it's almost no equity, but at that point you're paying a lot less interest and more principal.
Yeah.
So the equity buildup gets tremendous at that point. Every year that goes by, you're building more and more equity.
And better chance at equity with a 10-year-old loan.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. So I like, you got to look at all those things when you're looking at a sub two. But when we structure sub twos and we wholesale them, it was always to the same 3 investors that we knew that we can trust. They had a lot of means. They were good people. They were very, pillars of the community. They weren't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. And we were very cautious with how we did it, but yeah.
So you gave the seller, you're out of pocket, let's say $5,000, catch up some payments, give them some money to move the seller, and then say you wholesale it for $25,000. So the end buyer, one of those 3 people that you're talking about, pillars of the community, come to the table with $25,000, and then they start making the payments, correct?
Yeah.
And then you get 25 minus 5, you get a $20,000 wholesale fee pretty much.
Well, no. So the buyer buys everything. So the wholesale fee includes, so let's say I wanted to make $25,000 in that deal, but there's also $5,000 reinstatement.
Yeah.
And there's closing costs and whatever. So my wholesale fee to them is going to be $30,000.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right? Because then the $30,000 has my wholesale fee plus the reinstatement amount and all that. Nice. And that was acceptable. That's kind of what's expected. That's why whenever we send a sub two deal to somebody, we tell them, here's the reinstatement, here's what the PITI is going to be, here's what you're pretty much taking over.
Yeah. Right. No, I love that. Super cool strategy, especially nowadays.
Oh, nowadays, with the interest rates being what they are.
Yeah. Where the BRRRR is not dead, but pretty damn close.
Yeah. Well, and especially in San Antonio. In San Antonio, we had home prices like really shoot up.
Yeah.
And so you had home prices shoot up, interest rates shoot up, insurance shoot up, taxes go up, and rents are still kind of low because they take a while to catch up.
Yep.
So people are needing to leave like $50,000, $60,000 on a property just for it to cash flow.
Yeah. It's pretty similar here, but it's more like $20,000 in here, but still it has to happen. You got to be at, like you said last night when you were talking, you got to be almost at that 60-65% LTV to get the cash flow that a normal deal 2 years ago at 80% LTV would get.
And that's why buyers weren't getting a lot of wholesale deals, buy and hold buyers, because it's like, I got to wholesale it to you at like 65 for it to make sense to you, but I can wholesale it to a fix and flipper for 80%.
Yeah.
Because it completely flip. I have flippers.
That still works.
Yeah. It's at 80%. Like, that's where I didn't get to, there's so many things I wish I would have been able to cover yesterday, but like the 70% rule. People talk about, the 70%, the 80% rule. I'm like, after $250,000 ARV, the 70% rule almost doesn't matter anymore.
Especially to flippers.
Exactly.
Especially.
You got to run your numbers.
Yep.
So what are my costs?
Yeah.
Am I listing it? Do I have an agent that's listing it? What are the fees? What are the closing costs?
Yeah.
What is all that? Because after that, maybe I've done $350,000 home that are 84%.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Because I was still netting $35,000.
Yeah.
Because it was a quick in and out deal.
Yeah, we run our numbers very similar. Our like kind of floor for the normal 75% rule is a little higher than yours. It's that 400 is where we run it, and then we start to run an ROI formula, and we want to make 10% on whatever our total investment is. And so if we're into it for 400, we want to make 40K on a house. So, and if we're going to make 40K on a house using the discount percentage method, we'd probably be at 85%, give or take. So that model definitely has changed for us, and it's been fun because we've been able to get a lot of big chunks of profit on those $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 houses that we would have passed on, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no, and even that, like, when we factor in our repairs, what we're getting to now, because we source our own deals, is I want at least 1-to-1 return for the repair to profit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So if I'm putting $30,000, I would better be making at least 30 grand, if not more.
Yeah.
Right. So, and especially when it goes higher, but once it crosses like 70 grand, I want to be making closer to 90, because at those levels in San Antonio, when you're renovating that much, there's more things that can go wrong. There's more, it could take longer. Things can shift more. So I want to create a better buffer. Because I'm generating my own deals. I don't need to do marginal deals anymore.
No, I love that. I like looking at it that way. So